Alf Seegert is the designer of 11 board games, including the Eagle-Gryphon games titles Fantastiqa, Rival Realms, The Road to Canterbury, Musée, and Heir to the Pharaoh. Alf is a professor in the Department of English at the University of Utah, where he teaches courses on virtuality, fantasy, and video game storytelling. His teaching centers on the interplay of mechanics and narrative in games. So let's hear from Alf directly on these different topics.
So I grew up on role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, Tunnels & Trolls, and board games like the electronic hybrid Dark Tower and Talisman, which is sort of a hybrid board game, D&D style game. And I found a lot of solace in these sorts of games in some pretty dark times, and I'll forever be grateful to the games themselves, those who made them, and to my friends who I played them with or who were amazing dungeon masters through those sorts of campaigns. I'm also a lifelong video gamer. I actually teach video game narratives in the classroom. And about 20 years ago, I was playing quite a lot of video games, and my wife quite rightly pointed out it would be really nice if we played more games together in physical space. So I did a little bit of research and I stumbled on something I'd never heard of before, namely Euro games. So they were called German-style games back in the day. And so we started playing Settlers of Catan, and before we knew it, we had friends over every weekend playing all sorts of these new Euro games. And before long, I found myself designing them as well. I couldn't help it. And I submitted a bunch to the Hippodice German game competition. I was in the top 10 about 6 times before I finally got published. And about 10 years after that now, I have about 11 games designed. I think 3 things managed to warp my sensibilities as a young one. And the first would be Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The second, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But the most important thing that I encountered as an absolute revelation in 3rd grade was the Phantom Toll Booth. Each of these, Monty Python's Holy Grail, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you find absurdity melded with coherent, passionate world building. And for me, the Phantom Toll Booth was really the template for Fantastiqa in a whole lot of ways. And it's a 20th century Alice in Wonderland. And if you don't know it, there's no way I can possibly paraphrase it, but let me just leave you with the map right here to tantalize you. So if I were to play with more than 2 in this house, it would have to involve, well, this guy. And he's adorable, but he sucks at Euro games. When a game takes on a life of its own and it starts to feel like it's designing itself through you, that feeling can be pretty magical. And the moment that you move from, hey, that's a neat idea, to, this is actually fun, that's enormously appealing. And then when you learn that other people feel the same way, that can make you really, really happy, especially if you know that you've created a little sub-world like Fantastiqa and now other people are going to be playing in it. And I've received lots of emails and notes from people who seem to enjoy those spaces, and that's enormously gratifying. So I'm an English professor, and although my focus is not on medieval literature, I'm a huge fan of the Canterbury Tales and of Chaucer. And about a decade ago, I was teaching the Pardoner's Tale from the Canterbury Tales in the classroom, and it struck me how perfect it would be as the basis of a board game, because it's a study in corruption, where the Pardoner would approach medieval pilgrims with all sorts of fake relics and fake pardons and sell them. And I thought, well, there's a money-making scheme for you in a board game. But the catch is that you would have to keep yourself in business by tempting pilgrims to commit sins that you would then promise to pardon by selling them the pardons. So you keep them, you basically keep yourself in business that way. But the problem, of course, is that maybe if you made these the 7 deadly sins, then that would be tantalizing, but also a way that the game would make sure that you can't keep your customer base around forever. They start dying of the very sins that you tempt them to commit, that you then remit by giving them pardons. I think the first thing I would say is design what you yourself want to play. That's where your passion is going to lie. And if you truly love it, and if other people play it and they love it, there's a good chance a lot of other people will love it. That's not the place to stay, but it's the place, I think, to begin, to make sure that your passion is running the show. If a game design is keeping you up at night and you can't help but work on it, that's a really good sign. Not a good sign for your health, but it's a good sign for your creativity and game development. If you're wanting to design games in order purely to make money, I would urge you to do something else. Designing games as a way to make money has got to be one of the least efficient conversions of time to money that I could possibly imagine, with very few exceptions. If you're not doing this out of love, then what? The quest for objectivity is a big thing that gets suggested to game designers to make sure that you have your game played by other people than just your family members, your spouse, etc., because they're going to say nice things to you. That's absolutely true. You need to do that at some point. However, I think there's risks on that side as well, because if you test your game in highly objective conditions and you have people play who, for example, may not know each other, have no invested in messing with one another, then you might get a really cold outcome and a sense of disinterest that's a response to the context and not really a response to your game. So I would keep that in mind. I would urge you to test your game the way that George Lucas did his casting for Star Wars, by having ensemble casting, people who work well together, instead of just finding one person at a time who might like your game and then matching them up. I would really urge you to not test your game with anyone who doesn't like the genre that the game belongs to. In the same way that it's not going to be reliable to have a rock music critic respond to opera or vice versa. If you have a Western-themed board game and you have someone who doesn't like Westerns play it, they're probably going to respond to the theme and the genre more than they are the actual game. And you'll get completely unhelpful feedback. And so show your game to someone who likes that genre or something close to it. Don't be discouraged if not everybody loves your game. I would urge you to get on a Board Game Geek and look up your 5 favorite games and read only the bad reviews. You'll be astonished. Stuff that you thought was unambiguously brilliant and that everybody would love, there are haters of everything out there, no matter how good. That will give you some perspective. And then finally, if you play a game by somebody else and you don't enjoy it, but you really wanted to, that's a great starting point for you to go, wait a minute, that was really neat, but why did they use that mechanic? Wouldn't it have been better if they did this? That's a great way to start building your own games.